And part
I love the
three,
background. I love it.
part three of this story, this is so good. Disney Files Part 3, Disney, the Killer of Dreams. Alan Ng got this out a couple of days ago. He's traveling today, so he couldn't join us, but I want to kind of go through this because it fits into this narrative once again. So let me just read through this, and then we can kind of discuss it as we go because I think this is fascinating. Like every member of the Disneyana family, Walt Disney has always been a part of our lives. The first movie I ever saw was Mary Poppins. There was nothing more exciting than our annual trip to Disneyland. I watched anything and everything Disney, and I'm old enough to have watched reruns of The Wonderful World of Disney hosted by the man himself, Walt Disney. Hell, I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on the company. You're welcome. For me and many others, working for Disney, now, as I should remind folks, this isn't Alan talking. This is his source speaking. That Alan then creates these articles from. For me and many others, working for Disney and being a part of Walt's grand legacy was the dream. My first post-college interview was with Disney Studios. Didn't get it. Living in Orange County, I know more people who worked for Disney than those who didn't. What was a dream decades ago has now become a nightmare, though the change in the wrong direction happened long before Bob Iger fired John Lasseter. It was at that moment the corporate and office culture at Disney made a turn for the worse and became a toxic environment where the inmates ran the asylum. In the last D-Files, I showed how outside sinister forces got their foot in the door at Walt Disney Animation, beginning with Raya and the Last Dragon, and under the banner of hashtag #MeToo and gender equality, or gender equity, excuse me. Rather than naturally developing female and minority talent, Disney, under the leadership of Jennifer Lee, chose to force 50-50 equity at the studio, like Mickey Mouse cleaning up Jensen's laboratory in Fantasia. So, quite the visual there. And we got, I love AI sometimes. There you go, Mickey Kruger. The result of Lee's wish may have destroyed the animation industry in America in one fell swoop. The unintended, or some would say intended, consequences of her actions were the creation of a toxic work environment where everyone is walking on eggshells and intent on shoving out veteran talent and ushering in an army of activists dead set on transforming the company in a way that Walt Disney himself would not recognize. Previously, I touched on the nature of the new blood brought into Disney animation, like Maleficent's goons. And since that article, new information has come to light that will illuminate these new artists are where they came from. I referenced the female lead filmmakers panel from Raya and the Last Dragon, particularly in a statement from head of story Fawn Verisanthorn regarding the hiring pool. And when she addresses how she got her job at Disney, she states, quote, "I didn't grow up in the big city. And I think with the change of internet and social medias, I think the youngest generation will benefit from being able to see the work that millennials like me put out there on social media platforms, and for us to be able to see a variety of talents who's putting their work out there. That kind of changed the landscape in the hiring pool. Instead of hiring formally trained artists and traditional institutions like CalArts, Disney, with the help of women in animation, explicitly recruited from social media websites, including Tumblr and Reddit, a fact confirmed by numerous sources." So stop right there. You think about, all of a sudden you've had this quality that was put out by this company for decades, built by Walt, and now, you know what? We don't need that level of professionalism in terms of educational background anymore. We're just going to hide.
Let me play devil's advocate, though.
Yep.
There was a shift over the last generation away from hand-drawn art to computer-generated art. So you could have people working in animation who don't have natural talent or artistic training, I suppose. I mean, this sounds really naive, but I imagine that to some extent that would be part of the response. We're no longer really looking for artists. I was just, reading about how one of the reasons, what's his name, the great comic artist Jack Kirby, left Disney was because he was too artistic.
Yeah. Yeah, and you still have these days. My daughter is in college. She's looking at pursuing. She does a lot of art. She's looking at pursuing animation, and you've got to know. You still have to have the artistic skill to go through those programs. Yes, you have to learn a little bit more technological component to it, but you still got to have the natural skill and ability. I mean, let's say, for example, that we started hiring Twitter lawyers instead of real ones to perform in court. I mean, that's kind of the same thing here. Speaking of a guy
That's kind of
who's
what we watched this week, actually. Except
I
that
know.
these people actually are graduates of well-known law schools, like
Well,
Emory.
we have one of your friends here, Ron, who he's a
I
great.
have so many friends.
He's a great Twitter lawyer. I don't know if he's a real one, but he's fun to watch. No, I'm kidding. Please welcome back to the program, Joe Neerman. Good Logic is in the house with us.
What a great intro. What a good intro. And now I'm feeling threatened that I'm going to be replaced by Fiverr or Upworks. They're just going to find some other Twitter lawyer to replace me. I'm feeling I gotta start like questioning all my rates and stuff like that.
Yeah. I don't know. Fonnie Willis is going to keep you in business for a while. Don't worry.
So
great. Think about this for a second. They're so dedicated towards this bizarre CRT-driven DIE crap. That if they were smart about it and they weren't quite so desperate to have it implemented on such a broad scale, and we're satisfied with it just pervading over time into the Disney culture, they never would have written it down. They would have just told the powers that be at various levels, look, these are your targets, and there would have been it would have been a verbal conversation. They instituted it, something that was clearly illegal under American law, as a policy in writing that they're disseminating throughout various multiple levels of Disney, because this can't be something that takes place over the next 2 years, 5 years. This is something we have goals for 2023, goals for 2024. That's how desperate they were to not just implement this backward, self-destructive approach to how they run their business, but to do it with alacrity and with a definitiveness.
No, it's great. You and I landed on the same point. Like, you came at it from a different angle, and I really appreciate that. I said the universities have figured out how to do it through the back door. They've already got, color coding and magic words and all kinds of, pretextual ways of continuing to discriminate. But Disney can't help itself from throwing this stuff up on the website, saying, "No, this is what we're all about. We're all about this." And just like the Hawaii Supreme Court, we don't really care what the law is.
Right. Go back up to that. Go back to the paragraph with the 50-50. I want to. So
Sure.
We've been talking about the legal side of this. Let's talk about the pragmatic effect on the company, on the industry.
Still like that image.
Yeah, it is wonderful. I think it's right there, 50-50.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me walk through why this is so nefarious, okay? Because this is more nefarious than it looks just at first glance. We'll read it again. Rather than naturally developing female and minority talent, Disney, under the leadership of Jennifer Lee, chose to force 50-50 equity at the studios, like Mickey Mouse cleaning up Yensid's laboratory in Fantasia. Okay. Now, why this is more sinister is because if you come in, and by the way, let's give some background on Jennifer Lee. She's the woman, she landed big with Frozen. And she landed big with Frozen because despite the animation not being great in Frozen, I know, shocking, the soundtrack was phenomenal. Now, she doesn't have much to do with the soundtrack. So she gets really lucky and she hits the lottery. And she explodes, and she's the one who replaces John Lasseter in terms of the creative engine behind both the animation and Pixar. Technically she's animation, but I promise you her influence is far, far wider than that. Now, here's where it's more nefarious, though. Take a look, folks, at chose to force 50-50 equity at the studio. Now, consider for a moment that animation is an antisocial profession. And what do we know about women? We know, because we're not crazy and we remember what the world was like five years ago, we remember that traditionally we understood that women tend to be more interested in professions which have a social aspect, and men tend to be more interested, although this is not, this is not binary for every individual, right? There's a spectrum of personalities, but this is nudged in a particular direction. Men tend to be interested in careers of things, And animation is one of those careers. And so therefore, it was always skewed male. Now, if you come in and you attempt to make it 50-50 and you demand it right now, that doesn't mean that you hire 50-50. That means you need to hire like 80%, 85% in order to move that needle to 50-50 rapidly.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about here is a revolutionary changing of the guards in terms of push out the white guys and bring in the women. And that changed the entire atmosphere of the company, because then on top of that, they set up this additional layer where these Bergs, B-E-R-G, if you land into any kind of minority or underrepresented group that Disney chooses to set forth, okay, like for example, if you're someone who identifies as black and Disney will go along with that, you get literally into the Wakanda Berg. We're not making it up. There's a group at Disney called Wakanda, and if you're a black employee there, you're in Wakanda. I know. That seems to be awful.
Hopefully Rachel Dolezal made it into that one.
Those groups, Valiant.
As
those
white,
groups,
black, whatever.
This is what yeah, I love.
You saw what happened to her
I
this
know what
week.
she's up to lately. And God help anybody who was looking that out. Good grief, you're desperate. Okay, you need a reevaluation. But anyway,
really,
the other layer to this is not only do you have to have this revolutionary sort of altering of how you hire in order to force a 50-50 parity immediately, but the other part of this is that then those underrepresented groups, quote unquote, were given precedent in terms of story decisions. They got to come in and make decisions about the story and then form groups prior to going into the writer's room. And that's what Alan Ing brought out. Mm-hmm. That's what destroyed this entire thing. That's why Wish is abysmal, not only in the story, but in the animation. It's why they don't even know how to frame the images in the, they don't even frame the scenes correctly. It's why it's called keyframing. When you keyframe the animations, they don't even know how to do that right. And that's why the characters in that movie look like they're background characters. They move like background characters, is because they utterly emptied out the talent and they replaced it with incompetence based on just finding people with immutable differences that they like.
Right, so
and put them in
let
more
me
power.
just suggest that the market works. Okay. And what we're seeing is the content sucks. And that's what we've been talking about on this channel on Sunday nights, as long as I've been participating.
Yeah.
And I'm coming from it from the point of view of someone who doesn't go to the movies. Nonetheless, it's very clear to me from everything I'm picking up. And I do love listening to movie criticism. And I mean, there are things that nonetheless, as someone who does participate in culture in some sense, that the race swaps and the girl bosses and et cetera, they're not getting tuchuses into the seats. And if you don't get those into the seats, you don't get the revenue. And you can't, as I said over and over again, this seemed like a great idea when it seemed that the franchise system, the IP franchises, were a perpetual guarantee of automatic revenue. And what we found out in 2023 was it's not. You need to do good work to get people to pay for your product. And that's why this isn't going to last. It's not going to last.
10-second response to that. I think this is so important. Ron, what do you do when you empty out? If the market works, what do you do when you've emptied out the talent in your studio and now you have a bunch of people hired there who cannot do the job any longer? You outsource it to a new studio that's never done anything before, because that's the last option you have. That's what's happened with Moana and Vancouver. They literally think that handing it off to a brand new studio with no talent, strike that, with no experience whatsoever, is better than running it through the traditional Disney animation or Pixar. That's where we are.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.